Chapter 251. Ah, good. With the seniors here, we won't have to worry about the Gogurians being unable to subdue them. Wang Chong chuckled. At this moment, he felt that his previous decision was a wise one. With Ma Yinlong and the others around, his plan could be considered complete. They had fought with the Gogurians for more than a decade now, and they had a deep understanding of their actions and habits. With them around, the success rate of the operation against the Gogurians would be greatly increased. With the eagle around, it won't be a problem for us to find the Gogurian base. However, this is far from sufficient. Ma Yinlong wasn't as optimistic as Wang Chong. It doesn't matter how many Gogurians, including the Gogurian assassins, die here. The Gogurian Empire can send more people over at any moment. To them, this bit of damage is nothing. The one I'm truly worried about is King Sozhiram. Ma Yinlong frowned deeply. Shoot the horse first, and capture the bandits first. Even if we manage to foil their operation, I'm not confident that we'll be able to capture King Sozhiram. As long as he's around, the Gogurians can still launch a second, third, or perhaps even more frenzied vengeance. This isn't a loss that we can afford. Ma Yinlong said. In an instant, the atmosphere in the room turned tense once more. Even the steel guards of the Qi clan could understand the meaning behind Ma Yinlong's words. King Sozhiram was the root of everything. If they couldn't capture him, no matter how many Gogurians they killed, they would still be defeated if he were to carry out his vengeance. Brother Ma is right. Gongzi, you haven't interacted with King Sozhiram before, so you don't understand him. He might seem cautious at times, but there are times when he can be extremely frenzied. He's definitely capable of doing such a thing. Steel Arms, who had been silent all this while, suddenly stepped forward and said with a grim expression. Back then, we did reap quite a harvest. We killed many of the Gogurian elites in the capital. But after the incident, King Sozhiram began his vengeance. Under the frenzied assassination of the Gogurians, the brothers from back then were either killed or wounded. In the end, only the few of us were left. It was then that I lost my left hand. The other two did not speak, but their expressions revealed the same thoughts. Wang Chong frowned as he recalled the ferocity and viciousness of the Gogurian warriors on the night of the assault on the Kunwu training camp. Given their personalities, this kind of thing was completely possible. At this moment, Wang Chong realized that he had overlooked something. He had underestimated the matter of dealing with the Gogurians. Given the current situation, if they couldn't capture King Sozhiram, their actions would be meaningless. Even if King Sozhiram failed this time, he could still launch a second, third, or even fourth large-scale assassination. If they couldn't withstand it, they could even delay it indefinitely, waiting for them to relax before taking action. They could guard it for a month and be on high alert, but what about a year or two? The crux of this operation was no longer whether they could find the Gogurian base or how many Gogurians they could kill. Instead, it was whether they could capture King Sozhiram, the Gogurian spy king. Seniors, do you have any ideas? Wang Chong raised his head and asked. It's simple. Gongzi, weren't you afraid of alerting the Gogurian base? That's why you didn't make a move on them in the past. But the situation is different now. What we need to do is to alert them. Ma Yinlong narrowed his eyes, and a cold glint gleamed in them. It's about time to wipe out the Gogurian bases in the capital. Gongzi, there's no need to hold back in this operation. Only by destroying the Gogurian bases in the capital will we be able to foil King Sozhiram's plans. Only then will we be able to make him reveal his flaws. I know him well, and he won't cancel his plans so easily. On the contrary, he will speed up the execution of his plans. As the Gogurian spy king, he's too conceited. Besides, to him, no matter how many losses there are, sacrificing the Gogurians is nothing to him. At the end of his words, Ma Yinlong slammed his fist on the table. Even Wang Chong felt his heart palpitating at the sight of it. As his nemesis, he really wanted to kill King Sozhiram with his own hands. Don't worry. Leave this matter to me. After a moment of silence, Wang Chong nodded. After leaving the Royal Jade Pavilion, Wang Chong headed straight for the King of Song's residence. From the King of Song, Wang Chong obtained a token for the mobilization of the royal guards. Only a king of the royal family like the king of Song was capable of such a feat. After settling this matter, Wang Chong went to meet his uncle, Li Lin. Dealing with the Gogurians would be a huge contribution if he could do it well. As the saying went, keep the goodies within the family. Toward his own family, Wang Chong treated them well. In any case, he wouldn't be able to benefit from this matter. Wang Chong's uncle, Li Lin, was also very straightforward. After hearing Wang Chong's words, he discussed it with the commander of the imperial army, Zhao Fengchen, and decided to dispatch a large group of imperial army soldiers to assist Li Lin. With this group of soldiers, Wang Chong had around 4,000 experts under him. Based on Wang Chong's request, there were also quite a few master archers among them. Putting aside using this army to encircle the Gogurians, it was more than sufficient to fight a small-scale battle on the battlefield. The capital was under the feet of the Son of Heaven. In order to not cause too much panic and chaos among the populace, as well as to prevent the Gogurians from sensing anything amiss beforehand, the operation was decided to be carried out at night instead. Are you all ready? Amidst the darkness, Wang Chong stood beneath a tree and gazed at the residents from afar. The lights in the residence were extremely bright, and they served as a beacon to guide the crowd. Get ready. Master archers were stationed at all the crucial junctions. If anyone were to leave the residence, death would be the only outcome. Gongzi, don't worry. On the crown of a lush tree behind him, a speed-type imperial army soldier squatted down and said grimly. From Zhang Xian's angle, he could see numerous fully armored imperial army soldiers surrounding the courtyard in the distance. These imperial army soldiers were well-trained elites, and according to Wang Chong's request, the frontmost row was equipped with heavy armor and shields. The encirclement was slowly shrinking, but without Wang Chong's orders, no one dared to attack recklessly. Get ready. Release the signal. Wang Chong stared into the distance with a cold expression before swinging his arm down. Boom. The response to Wang Chong's words was a brilliant firework that soared into the clouds. The dazzling sparks and a long trail of smoke trailed behind it, making it particularly eye-catching in the dark night. This was the signal to attack. Kill. In the next instant, battle cries reverberated in the air. Under the starry sky, brilliant halos of thorns bloomed in the darkness like beautiful flowers. From the first base where Wang Chong and the others were at, to the second base, to the third base, all the way to the 14th base, almost all of the Gogurians' bases in the Tang dynasty's capital were under attack. 3,000 to 4,000 royal guards and the city defense army were like wolves and tigers. Under the starry night, they crossed the city walls and charged into the courtyards with high walls. Shield-bearers, master archers, cavalrymen. All of them worked together, from defense to offense. All of the Gogurian bases were tightly surrounded, making it impossible for even a drop of water to pass through. Enemy attack. From afar, a shrill cry in Gogurian resounded across the sky. The Gogurian sentries had finally noticed the Imperial army. Congratulations to user for killing 21 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. All of a sudden, a familiar voice sounded in Wang Chong's ears. Boom. Along with this voice, a powerful gale blew, and surges of energy surged into Wang Chong's body from all directions. What's going on? Sensing the changes in his body, Wang Chong was stunned. The operation had just begun, and he hadn't killed a single Gogurian yet. Why would he receive such a notice? However, before Wang Chong could clear his doubts, something even more shocking happened. Congratulations to user for killing 22 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 23 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 24 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 25 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. A series of cold and familiar voices echoed in Wang Chong's head, leaving him dumbfounded. Dense origin energy gathered from all directions and converted into Wang Chong's strength. In just a short period of time, the progress of Wang Chong's Bane of the Battlefield aura had already surpassed the sum of the past few months. Furthermore, this number was still increasing rapidly. Everything that was happening before him had far exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. but the constantly growing energy of the bane of the battlefield halo in his body clearly reminded him that everything was real. Congratulations to user for killing 35 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 36 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 37 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 49 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 50 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 51 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. A series of notifications sounded, and Wang Chong was completely stunned by this pleasant surprise. Almost subconsciously, Wang Chong released the bane of the battlefield aura in his body. Amidst the darkness, massive ripples that only Wang Chong could see spread out in all directions. This time, even at a distance of 1,200 meters, Wang Chong could clearly see white ripples appearing beneath the feet of the Goguryeo soldiers in the courtyard. Different from the first aura, all of the Goguryeo soldiers caught in the white ripples were weakened significantly. Panic spread among the Goguryons. Clearly, they had sensed the abnormality in their bodies. In an instant, the casualties of the Goguryons increased. Congratulations to user for killing 81 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 82 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 83 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 101 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 102 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 103 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Information gushed into Wang Chong's head like a waterfall. At the same time, the ripples around Wang Chong grew even more intense. Chapter 252. The battle had only just begun, and there were definitely less than 100 casualties in the first base. Without a doubt, the deaths of the Goguryons mentioned by the Stone of Destiny definitely involved the other Goguryon bases and bases. Could it be because of this? In an instant, a thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and he took out a luxurious golden token. This token was given to him by the King of Song, and it represented that he was the commander of this operation. After much thought, Wang Chong realized that the only reason why the deaths of the Goguryons in the other bases could be attributed to him was because of this token. Could it be that this token, or perhaps, my official rank can be of use in this operation, and I don't have to kill them personally? Wang Chong thought. At this point, Wang Chong was delighted. Somehow, Wang Chong felt that he had found a shortcut to raise the bane of the battlefield halo. Ponglong. At this moment, Wang Chong's body finally completed the final transformation. Hong Long Long, a furious gale blew, and the rumbling of thunder echoed in Wang Chong's head. Following which, a massive ripple suddenly surged out, and a powerful surge of energy gushed out. Congratulations to user for killing more than 100 Goguryon warriors. The bane of the battlefield halo has been raised from level 0 to level 1. The cold and familiar voice of the Stone of Destiny sounded in Wang Chong's head. At the same time, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo expanded outward. In the distance, the entire Goguryon base was shrouded in this halo. Halos suddenly appeared around the bodies of the Goguryon warriors, shocking the Imperial Army soldiers who were fighting with them. They thought that they had used some sort of trump card to boost their fighting prowess. But what was even more shocking was the Goguryons on the other side. They had already been weakened significantly, but this time, they were weakened even more. Some of the true martial realm Tier 1 experts with one ring dimmed, like candles in the wind that were about to be extinguished. On the other hand, the Origin Energy Tier 9 Goguryon experts were affected even more. Not only did they fall from Origin Energy Tier 9 to Origin Energy Tier 8, they even showed signs of falling toward Origin Energy Tier 7. What the hell is going on? Li Zhuan's hair was disheveled. He was shocked and angry. As the leader of the base, he wasn't affected by the bane of the battlefield at all, so he didn't understand what was happening to the others. However, everyone's strength had been greatly reduced, and they were completely out of sorts. There was no doubt about this. Retreat! 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 Li Jiahuan was shocked and angry at the same time, shouting repeatedly. These imperial guards of the Tang dynasty came in a menacing manner, and there were many elites among them. It could be seen that they came prepared. Li Jiahuan was well aware that they had already been exposed. They could no longer keep the space. Li Jiahuan's only hope now was that they were the only ones exposed. Xiu xiu xiu. In the courtyard, countless steel arrows whizzed forth like venomous snakes. At this crucial moment, the two Goguryeo Condor snipers stationed in the first base came into play. Even though there were only two of them, they were top-notch Condor snipers. With a single move, they shot out 4 to 5 lethal arrows, shrouding all of the Imperial Army soldiers in the courtyard. Long. But not too long after they made their move, an earth-shattering sound echoed in the distance. Before Li Jiahuan could react, boom boom. Not too long after the two Condor snipers made their move, 2 thick and long arrows pierced through their chests, and they were pinned to the ground. Too hurried. Too fast. Without giving anyone any time to dodge, the two Condor snipers whom the Goguryons had spent a great deal of effort to groom were pinned to the ground in an instant, and they couldn't be any more dead. Li Jiahuan's face also turned as pale as a sheet of paper. He stared into the distance, and the color drained from his face. So, without the slightest hesitation, Li Jiahuan suddenly rose from the ground and leaped onto the roof. Without stopping for even a moment, he fled eastward without a second thought. Everyone here was doomed. Not a single one of them would be able to escape. Li Jiahuan knew that he could only protect himself now. Where do you think you're going? A deafening bellow echoed. Just as Li Jiahuan was about to reach the wall, an Imperial Army commander dashed forward like a hawk, and with a slash of his saber he blocked Li Jiahuan's path in midair. At this moment, the 2-meter-tall master archer sent over by the King of Song also slowly lowered the extra-large bow in his hands. There wasn't the slightest change in his expression, as though he had just done something insignificant. Well done. Under the shade of a tree, Wang Chong was delighted to see this sight. He raised his thumb and complimented the other party generously. This fellow was too formidable. He was a one-sided slaughter. If such an expert had been present on the night of the assault on Kunwu, he would have been able to defeat the several hundred master archers of the Goguryons and Turks. The King of Song had sent him an incredible expert. Clang. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong unsheathed his sword and bellowed as he charged into the distance. Gongzi, be careful. Seeing Wang Chong make a move, Myasame Ayaka was alarmed. As though a shadow, she dashed out from the nearby forest and hurriedly followed after him. Ha, don't worry. With such a large army, what danger could there possibly be? Wang Chong laughed heartily. Driving phantom movement art to its limits, he dashed forward like a wisp of black smoke. Congratulations to user for killing 140 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 141 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 142 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 175 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 176 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 177 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. The familiar voice in his head was still gushing down like a waterfall. Raging winds blew in all directions, and immense energy was gushing endlessly into Wang Chong's body, strengthening Wang Chong's strength. The might of the bane of the battlefield halo continued to rise, and invisible ripples began to spread outward with Wang Chong at the center. At this moment, not only was it shrouding the entire Goguryeo first base, it was even spreading toward the Goguryeo second base in the distance. The area it covered was truly frightening. And under the influence of this halo's power, the true martial realm experts were affected more and more severely. Those one-ringed martial artists, in the first level of the true martial realm, were already greatly affected. The cyan thorny halo around their bodies was like a candle in the wind, on the verge of collapse. And as Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield halo continued to grow stronger, it was now bursting like a bubble. All of these people had their martial halos stripped away. On the other hand, after the Origin Energy Realm Gogrian experts fell to Origin Energy Tier 7, the effects of the halo lessened, and they didn't fall any further. Wang Chong was perplexed at the start, but he soon understood the reason behind it. The halo only affected the origin energy in a martial artist's body, and it didn't have much of an effect on one's physical strength. Thus, after the Origin Energy Realm Gogrian warriors fell to Origin Energy Tier 7, they wouldn't fall any further. Even so, the might of the Bane of the Battlefield Halo was still fearsome. Almost all of the Gogurians in the first base had fallen by an entire realm. And this was the might of a war-related halo. There was no longer any suspense in the battle in the first base. Before Wang Chong could participate in any of the battles, the battle in the courtyard had already ended. The entire courtyard was filled with Gogrian corpses, swords, and arrows. Reporting to Gongzi, there are a few metal chests in the Gogrian base. After the battle ended, an Imperial Army soldier came to report that they had found a few huge chests in the underground chamber of the first base. Wang Chong followed the Imperial Army soldier in, only to see several large metal chests, all of them locked, placed in a row in the middle of an underground chamber. What are these? Could they be weapons? Wang Chong thought. Since the Gogurians were prepared to wreak havoc in the capital, they must have prepared a huge amount of weapons. With a thought, Wang Chong whipped out his Wuxia steel weapon, and with a keng sound he sliced open the copper lock. Then with a wang sound he opened one of the metal chests. In the next instant, something unexpected happened. As soon as the chest was opened, a golden glow mixed with a rich aroma and mist drifted out from within. What was lying in the chest wasn't a weapon used by the Gogurians for their rebellion, but a chest full of highly aged Gogrian ginseng. Upon seeing the chest full of Gogrian ginseng, putting aside Wang Chong, even the Imperial Army soldier who was reporting the news couldn't help but suck in a deep breath of cold air. Even though they didn't know much about the Gogrian Empire, they had a rough idea that the ginseng produced by the Gogrian Empire was a top-notch martial artifact. There were at least 500 to 600 Gogurians in this chest. The value of the ginseng was inestimable. I've struck gold. Looking at the dazzling Gogrian ginseng, Wang Chong was stunned for a moment. The harvest was far greater than he had expected, such that Wang Chong couldn't react in time. If the chests here aren't weapons but ginseng, doesn't that mean that, looking at the huge metal chests, Wang Chong suddenly felt agitated, as though he had been struck by a great fortune. King. With such a thought in mind, Wang Chong brandished his Wuxia steel sword. King. He walked over and chopped down all of the copper chests. He opened the chests one after another, and every single one of them was filled with a golden glow. 12 chests of Gogrian ginseng. I've struck gold this time. In that instant, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. Gongzi, how should we deal with these Gogrian ginseng? The Imperial Army soldier by the side bowed and asked respectfully. He didn't seem to have any intention of getting his hands on the ginseng. Wang Chong was the commander of this operation, and he had the token of the King of Song on him. As such, he represented the King of Song. Putting aside the Gogrian ginseng, even if there was a mountain of gold, silver, or even immortal pills here, no one would dare to vie with the King of Song for it. The Imperial Army still had this rule. Leave one chest for the brothers to enjoy. As for the rest, bring them to my residence. Wang Chong narrowed his eyes and pondered for a moment. Then, with a wave of his hand, he decided on where the Gogrian ginseng would go. As the commander of this operation, he had the authority to do so. He believed that even if the King of Song were to learn of this, he wouldn't say anything. This operation to wipe out the Gogurians and destroy their influence in the capital was a huge contribution. He wouldn't be able to earn any credit, and he wouldn't be promoted either. However, these benefits were undeniable. He believed that no one would dare to vie with him. Thank you, Gongzi. Upon hearing that Wang Chong had left a chest for his brothers, the Imperial Army member who had asked for instructions was delighted. According to the rules, Wang Chong could have kept the ginseng for himself. Yet he actually gave them a chest. This was a huge favor. Chapter 253. The distribution of the spoils of war was soon decided, and all of the Goguryeo corpses in the base were looted clean. Wang Chong didn't forget that each of these Goguryons had a Goguryeo ginseng. While the battle at the first base had ended, the battles at the other bases were still ongoing. Congratulations to user for killing 301 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 302 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 303 soldiers of the Goguryeo Empire. The familiar voice in his head continued. The number of Goguryons Wang Chong had killed swiftly surpassed 300, and it was still rising at an alarming rate. The exhilaration of growing strength was indescribable. I didn't think that borrowing the token of the King of Song would bring me such great benefits. However, it's a pity that such a good thing only comes once. I'll have to return it to the King of Song after the operation. Wang Chong couldn't help but feel some regret. Princes had their own tokens, and officials had their own tokens. These tokens issued by the royal court had to be kept close to their bodies. They could be lent out occasionally, but it was impossible for them to not return it for a long period of time. Thus, Wang Chong's beautiful plans could only be wishful thinking at this point. After leaving the first base, Wang Chong brought Myasame Ayaka and the experts of the Zhuang and Qi clans with him, and they rushed to the other bases. Wang Chong's plan was simple. Due to the augmentation of his bane of the battlefield, the strength of the Goguryons in the first base had been greatly weakened. However, the same couldn't be said for the other bases. If he were to encounter those troublesome Goguryon bases with too many experts, his bane of the battlefield would be able to end the battle swiftly. Congratulations to user for killing 485 soldiers of the Goguryon Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 486 soldiers of the Goguryon Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 487 soldiers of the Goguryon Empire. The information in his head flowed like a waterfall. At this moment, Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield had already expanded to a radius of more than 8,000 meters, equivalent to a distance of 16 li. About an hour later, all the battles were over. At the same time, the total number of Goguryon warriors killed by Wang Chong also stopped at 623. Wang Chong's bane of the battlefield, Halo, also had a range of 11,000 meters. Other than that, there were dozens of boxes of Goguryon ginseng, and 80% of them were golden in color. Very few of them were the ordinary white ginseng that was only a few decades old. All of these iron boxes were sent to Wang Chong's mansion. This was the reward for being the commander and the victor. Ah, Chong, we've done a great service this time. Outside the walls of No. 8 space, a towering tree towered into the clouds, brimming with vitality. Beneath the tree, Uncle Li Lin's face was flushed red. Looking at the blazing flames in front of him, he was in high spirits and exhilaration. He really needed this kind of military merit. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to rely solely on Zhao Fengchen to promote him in the imperial army. With this meritorious deed, even without Zhao Fengchen's promotion, he would still be able to rise through the ranks. The more he looked at his nephew, the more he liked him, and the prouder he felt. Other people relied on fawning on their superiors, but he relied on his nephew to rise. However, Li Lin didn't think much of it. To have such a talented son in the clan was something to be proud of. After a few decades of silence, he was finally going to soar into the sky. Hee uncle, don't worry. This is just a small contribution. Once we capture King Sojurim, it'll be a huge contribution. It'll be easy for uncle to be promoted in the future. Wang Chong said with a smile as he stood beside his uncle. After a period of absence, Wang Chong realized that his uncle had changed a little. His figure was tall and straight, as though a spear was pierced into the ground. Furthermore, his spirit, energy, and psyche were united, and he exuded an aura of boundless vitality. Without a doubt, Wang Chong's uncle's cultivation had improved significantly during this period of time. The cultivation technique he had given him had finally come into effect. His efforts hadn't been in vain. Wang Chong felt gratified as well. The reason why Wang Chong introduced Zhao Fengchen to Uncle Li Lin was because he didn't want his uncle to be beneath Zhao Fengchen for the rest of his life. Following Zhao Fengchen was just a means, a process, and not his final goal. Wang Chang's final goal was for his uncle to become an independent existence in the imperial army, not a follower. Uncle, carry 5 boxes of those Gogurian ginseng over. Also, I'll give you a few more pills after some time. Wang Chong suddenly said. Why? Are you afraid that your uncle's cultivation is too low? Li Lin turned around and chuckled. Uncle, do you think that your position is too high? If I recall correctly, the imperial army should be divided into many factions. It's always better to be stronger. Besides, the ranks of the imperial army are also linked to one's cultivation, right? There's nothing wrong with Uncle bringing these things over to increase your strength as much as possible. Wang Chong said. He had intended to give a few more boxes over, but 5 boxes already amounted to more than 3,000 Gogurian ginseng. It was sufficient for Uncle Li Lin to cultivate by himself. Li Lin didn't say a word, but he fell into deep thought. His initial intention was to reject Wang Chang's offer. After all, the contribution he had was more than enough. As for the Gogurian ginseng, since they were his kin, there was no need for him to fight over them. However, upon hearing Wang Chang's final words, Li Lin fell silent. There were a few things that Wang Chong said that the imperial army was divided into many factions, and they were far more formidable than the outside world could imagine. Just by following Zhao Fengchen for a short period of time, he could already feel a strong sense of rejection. In the imperial army, strength was everything, and the fist was king. Whoever had the bigger fist had the right to speak, and they would be respected by others. All right. Li Lin nodded. He had finally changed his mind. Only then did Wang Chong smile. Reporting to the 2 lords, the battlefield has been cleaned up. At this moment, an imperial guard trotted over and stood respectfully before the 2 of them. But you may leave. Li Lin waved his hands and dismissed the imperial army member. Then, he turned to look at Wang Chong with a passionate gaze. Chong, the battle is over. What do you plan to do next? I hope you didn't alert the enemy with the final base. Wang Chong said. I didn't move. Li Lin nodded in understanding. All right, let's retreat. After sending Uncle Li Lin off, Wang Chong turned around and headed straight for the Royal Jade Pavilion. This was an opportune moment. The shops in the capital weren't open at night, and the Wang clan was too conspicuous. However, with the Royal Jade Pavilion as his base, it was much more convenient. He didn't have to worry about attracting attention. Even if others saw him eating in the pavilion, they would only think that he liked the food here, so he came here more frequently. Never would they have thought that he had bought this place. Even more so, Ma Yin-long, the eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf were all stationed here. How is it? As soon as Wang Chong went up the stairs, the 4 immediately gathered around him and asked anxiously. Wang Chong made an okay gesture, and upon seeing the doubtful gazes of the 4, he realized that they didn't understand what he meant. It's done. With a smile, Wang Chong corrected himself. You must be joking. After mobilizing so many imperial army members and borrowing the prestige of the King of Song, it would be a wonder if they still couldn't deal with this. Hearing Wang Chong's words, the 4 heaved a long sigh of relief. It was as though their hearts had finally settled back into their chests. Wang Gongzi, please don't blame us for the operation tonight. King Sozhirim is too familiar with us. Thus, none of us can participate in the operation tonight. Not only so, not even a single one of the eagles can be released. It's not a good thing to be exposed too early. If King Sozhirim realizes that we are participating in the operation tonight, the nature of the operation will be different. In fact, he might even cancel the operation altogether. Ma Yin-long suddenly thought of something and explained. Don't worry, I understand. Wang Chong chuckled casually and waved his hands, gesturing for Ma Yin-long to be at ease. Since he trusted Ma Yin-long and the others, how could he possibly doubt them for not putting in enough effort? Looking at Wang Chong's carefree expression, the 4 couldn't help but be impressed. Even though this Gongzi was young, there wasn't the slightest hint of inexperience in him. Even though he came from a noble clan, he didn't have the air of a profligate scion. After 15 years, There might really be hope for them to capture King Sojurim this time around. Elder, what should we do next? The group sat cross-legged on the floor and formed a circle. Wang Chong humbly asked for guidance. Gongzi, did you touch the last base? Not yet. Good, let's surround it. The crux of our operation lies in that base. If we were to destroy all of the bases, the Gogurians would think that we have grasped their movements. On the other hand, if we were to destroy some of the bases, the Gogurians would think that we have grasped their movements. The greater the momentum of our operation, the more bases we destroy, the stronger their conviction will be. We understand King Sojurim's mentality all too well. He's too conceited, so conceited that once he decides on a plan, he won't change it easily. No matter how great the sacrifice is, it's meaningless to him. He won't care. Our current advantage is that he's in the light, while we're in the dark. No matter how many Gogurian bases you destroy or how many people you kill, you're still a newcomer. King Sojurim doesn't understand you at all. He doesn't know that we're the ones hiding behind your back. This is our greatest advantage. Ma Yinlong said grimly. Wait a moment. Wang Chong suddenly interrupted Ma Yinlong. Elder, you said that King Sojurim doesn't understand me, right? Hee, I suddenly have an idea. After which, Wang Chong revealed his idea. Pa, that works too. Since we're going to do it, let's make it bigger. The more ostentatious you are, the more King Sojurim will be unable to see through you. At the same time, he will look down on you. Wang Gongzi, let's do as you say. Hearing Wang Chong's idea, Ma Yinlong chuckled. If they were to go along with Wang Chong's plan, it would be much easier for the plan to succeed. As for what happens next, the eagle, I'll leave it to you. The eagle nodded solemnly. Chapter 254. Boom. When the news of the dozen Gogurian bases being destroyed spread out, it caused a huge uproar in the capital. In the past, it wasn't a secret that the other foreign countries had spies in the Tang dynasty. However, none of them had built such a massive spy network like the Gogurian Empire. This was especially so after the corpses were displayed in the capital, causing a huge uproar. 500 to 600 Gogurian soldiers. This was a scale far greater than any other foreign country. It was on the scale of a minor rebellion. Furthermore, according to the news from the royal court, the bases they had built had a history of more than a decade. Through these bases, they had carried out countless assassinations and sabotage. In fact, the assault on the Kunwa training camp a while ago was one of their most outstanding feats. The Gogurian soldiers were the best evidence of this. After the large number of Gogurian soldiers were displayed, it further solidified the treacherous intentions of the Gogurian soldiers, causing a huge uproar in the capital. The city gate guards and imperial army began to move out to apprehend those who had slipped through the net. Even the Gogurian territory in the west of the capital was invaded by a large group of soldiers. The ferocious and valiant Gogurians chose to keep a low profile in the face of the rage of the citizens of the capital, cooperating with them. Furthermore, they made it clear that they were honest merchants, completely different from the Gogurian assassins and warriors who engaged in sabotage and sabotage. There was a world of difference between them and the Gogurian warriors. In a single day, a large number of Gogurians were apprehended. Faced with the large-scale operation of the royal court, the merchants of the various countries of the western regions chose to remain silent. Clearly, they could sense that the situation this time was different from the past. Assassination and sabotage couldn't be compared to legitimate business activities. The excuses they used in the past couldn't be used here. As the matter of the Gogurians caused a huge uproar in the capital, more and more details were revealed. In the operation last night, the commander of the imperial army went by the name of Li Lin, and he had contributed greatly to it. Due to this matter, he was commended by the imperial army and promoted to a grade 5 Dragonfang lieutenant. However, the one who uncovered the Gogurian spies was a name that the citizens of the capital couldn't be more familiar with: Wang Chong. It was during the Kunwa night raid that he discovered the traces of the Gogurians and traced them all the way to their bases. Eventually, he led the imperial army to wipe them out. It could be said that Wang Chong was the true hero behind the scenes. Bastard! In an unknown stronghold deep in the mountains outside the capital, An awe-inspiring figure slammed his fist on a table, exuding a terrifying aura. In front of him, 6 figures knelt on the ground. Their bodies shivered, and they kept quiet like cicadas in the dark. It's such a big operation. Didn't you guys notice it at all? There was no light in the room. That awe-inspiring figure leaned forward slightly, but a pair of eyes emitted a cold light in the darkness. That huge pressure caused people's hearts to tremble. Your Highness, their actions were very sudden. We didn't receive any news beforehand. Furthermore, they were directly mobilized from the Imperial Army. Late at night is the time when our brothers are most relaxed. With more than a dozen bases moving together, we didn't have any time to react, much less escape. The mastermind behind their scheme is extremely formidable. He didn't intend to give our men the slightest chance of survival. A black-robed assassin kneeling on the floor said, "Outside of Goguryeo, there was only one person who could be addressed as Your Highness." Without a doubt, the person before him was the highest authority of the Goguryeo Empire in the Central Plains, the Tang Dynasty, King Sojurim. It's impossible for our bases to be seen through so easily. Did you find any traces of the Fang of the White Tiger? King Sojurim asked coldly in the darkness. A chilling aura enveloped the entire room. More than a dozen bases had been destroyed. This was something that had never happened before. His first thought was that the experts from the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments had participated in the operation. Only those old foes would have such a deep understanding of the Goguryans. Nothing. When the incident happened, our men checked the surroundings, but they didn't find any traces of the Fang of the White Tiger. Another Goguryan assassin said, even though more than a dozen bases had been destroyed, the Goguryans were scattered all over the city. They weren't confined to a single base. It was just that the base had the most people. When the incident happened, the base was on fire. It was impossible for them to not notice such a big thing. Even though they didn't dare to approach the scene of the battle, they could still observe from the outside. As such, the Goguryans had gathered quite a bit of intelligence regarding last night's operation. Could this really be a coincidence? King Sojurim asked with narrowed eyes. Different emotions flashed through his eyes, but the kneeling Goguryan assassins lowered their heads even more fearfully. Even though we can't be certain, based on the news we received, this matter is likely to be a coincidence. Also, we have some news regarding the matter Your Highness asked us to look into. As the third Goguryan assassin spoke, he took out a scroll from his bosom and passed it over respectfully. Every single Goguryan assassin had their own responsibilities. Clearly, he was in charge of gathering intelligence. The room was silent. King Sojurim waited for 3 seconds before taking the scroll from the Goguryan assassin's hands. With just a single glance, King Sojurim's face warped slightly. He flipped through 2 to 3 pages and continued reading without saying a single word. Your Highness, we have investigated the identity of that Wang Chong from last night. He's the grandson of Duke Jiao of the Tang Dynasty, and the Imperial Army commander, Li Lin, is his uncle. The two of them have a close relationship. Even though he's young, we can't underestimate him. The Tang Dynasty consort Taijin incident and the regional commander's incident all have traces of this young man. In fact, there's even a rumor that the backer of the Yao clan, Yao Chong, who had been at odds with the Wang clan for decades, lowered his head to Wang Jiuling and admitted his mistake. From all of these, this young man is extremely talented. He isn't the profligate scion that we thought him to be. On top of that, he has a close relationship with the King of Song of the Tang Dynasty, and he has been to the King of Song's residence many times before. The Imperial Army commander who carried out the operation last night was also mobilized by him through the King of Song's influence. Otherwise, given his uncle Li Lin's position, it's impossible for him to mobilize such a large number of Imperial Army commanders. On top of that, our men found traces of him at the scene of the operation. As he has quite a few experts by his side, we didn't dare to make a move recklessly. More importantly, we found his name in the Kanwa training camp, and he was at White Tiger Peak, the place where the operation was first carried out. At this point, the third assassin paused for a moment before speaking with a deep meaning in his voice. On top of that, our men found a few students from the Kunwa training camp, and they found out that this lad had led his men to seek reinforcements from other camps. At the end of his words, the third assassin's voice was brimming with killing intent. At the same time, the other assassins also began emanating killing intent. Without a doubt, the matter was clear. It was inconceivable that more than a dozen of their bases had been destroyed, and it had dealt a heavy blow to them. However, judging from the deeds of that Wang Chong, it wasn't impossible for him to discover their bases. A person who could cause such a huge commotion in the imperial court of the Tang dynasty couldn't be judged with common sense. Appearance was no longer of any use to judge a person. No matter what he did, it was entirely possible. In an instant, the room fell silent. From King Sojurim to the 6 Goguryeo assassins, everyone was silent. Everyone could sense the weight of this news. Ever since the Fang of the White Tiger more than a decade ago, they hadn't met such an opponent in the capital of the Tang dynasty. Unlike the Fang of the White Tiger, the Fang of the White Tiger was a failure. But this young man named Wang Chong was only in his teens, and he had already brought them 2 failures and nearly 700 deaths. Compared to the Fang of the White Tiger back then, this Wang Chong was far more menacing and dangerous. This wasn't a good thing for the Goguryeo Empire and the people in this base. Everyone knew what this meant. This Wang Chong had to be eliminated, or else the threat he posed to Goguryeo would only grow greater and greater. Let me ask you, is the final base safe? Have you checked it? Are there any suspicious traces of the Tang people in the surroundings? After an unknown period of time, King Sojurim was the first to speak. His voice was filled with deep contemplation. I've checked it. Nothing. Everything around the base is normal. It seems like the Tang people haven't discovered this base yet. One of the assassins said. King Sojurim didn't say anything, but those who were familiar with him could sense that his gaze had relaxed significantly. A single base meant nothing to the Goguryeo Empire. Even if everyone in it were to die, it wouldn't mean much to them. However, the meaning behind this small base wasn't as simple as it seemed. It seems like he's still too young. In the darkness, King Sojurim raised his head and sneered coldly. Gather all of the Empire's warriors. King Sojurim stood up from his seat and said a few words. But the 6 in the room jolted in shock and abruptly raised their heads. Your Highness, should we move now? The Tang dynasty is currently at its most guarded against us. If we move now, we'll suffer heavy losses. They knew that King Sojurim wasn't a person who would give up easily, but none of them could have imagined that he would be in such a hurry to make a move at such a critical juncture. What's fake is real, and what's real is fake. This is the time when the Tang dynasty is at its most guarded, but at the same time, it's also the time when they're at their most relaxed. They would never have expected us to launch an assassination while they're conducting a large-scale search. King Sojurim raised his head with a disdainful gaze. Even though his voice wasn't loud, it carried an unquestionable tone. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, this has always been the style of our Goguryeo Empire. Retaliating is the best response to their attacks, and it's also the best consolation for our fallen warriors. As for sacrifice, what does a little sacrifice matter to the Empire? Those warriors who have sacrificed their lives for the Empire are honorable. The Empire will remember them. Those words extinguished all the objections in everyone's hearts. Reverence shone on the faces of the 6 assassins. Yes, Your Highness. 3 days later, the final batch of warriors will arrive. Let's move out. Also, add the Wang clan into the assassination list as well. Aren't we going to assassinate the influential officials of the Tang dynasty? This clan won't make a difference. There's always a price to pay for acting smart. At this point, King Sojurim harumphed coldly and walked down from his throne. The fate of the Wang clan had been decided. Chapter 255. While King Sojurim and the group of Goguryeo assassins were discussing their next course of action, no one noticed that in the depths of the night sky above their heads, a massive eagle was circling in the air. The eagle didn't make a sound, nor did it let out any cry. However, its sharp eyes were able to see everything in the dark as if it was daytime. So, after an unknown period of time, the eagle finally turned around and glided toward the northeast amidst the night breeze. Flick flick, the eagle glided down from the treetops and landed on a hill in the mountain. From the darkness, a rough arm reached out and caught the intelligent, well-trained eagle. At the same time, another arm tossed a piece of dried meat over. The eagle caught it and swallowed it in a few bites. To think that the Gogurian's base would be here. Lone Wolf frowned as he stroked his chin. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. From his angle, he could vaguely see the top of a monastery in the distance. Those Gogurians sure are cunning. To think that they would use a monastery in the depths of the mountain as their base of operations. If we didn't know about it, who would have thought that it would be their base of operations? Steel Hands was also feeling extremely fortunate. If not for the eagle noticing the Gogurians' communication ravens entering the monastery, he would have never imagined that the Gogurians would be hiding here. I remember that 4 months ago, a merchant reported to the royal court that he would donate a monastery in the depths of the mountain outside the city. From the looks of it now, the Gogurians have been plotting this for a very long time. Wang Chong looked in the southwest direction at the massive monastery with a deep frown on his forehead. Great Senior, this temple is very famous. Who could have thought that it would be a base of operations for the Gogurians? Thinking about it, the reason why King Sojurim was able to escape from the encirclement and return to the Gogurian Empire safely was probably due to this monastery. Since this monastery is a base of operations for the Gogurians, there's no doubt that the merchant who donated the money is a Gogurian as well. I heard that he also recruited a group of workers and forbade others to come near during the construction period. From the looks of it, not only the monks in the monastery, even the workers are Gogurians. There's no way the Gogurians would leave such a huge matter to an outsider. The night wind whistled. On the hill, everyone's expressions were solemn. King Sojurim was much more cunning than they had expected. This monastery took 4 months to build, and all of the workers and monks were disguised as Gogurians. Even if something happened, not many people would link it to this temple. Because all of this was done in the open, under everyone's eyes. No matter how many people they have, no matter how cunning they are, this operation is destined to fail. The eagle, what's the situation? Ma Yin-long stood under a pine tree and turned to look at the eagle, who was feeding the eagle. Not good. There's a sentry every 3 steps and a sentry every 5. I'm afraid that the Gogurians will notice us before we even get close to the monastery. Not only so, the terrain here is complicated, and there are mountains and forests all around, making it convenient for us to escape. If the Gogurians realize that their plan isn't working, they can just abandon the monastery and escape at any moment. The eagle tossed the last piece of jerky to the eagle on his arm with a grim expression. The Gogurians were far more vigilant than they had imagined, and there were no blind spots at all. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for them to get close to the monastery. Before the army could even get close, the Gogurians would have already fled. Hearing the eagle's words, everyone frowned. Even if they managed to find the Gogurian base, it would be difficult for them to accomplish their mission if they didn't resolve this problem. Perhaps they might even fail at the very end. Not only so, have you forgotten about the elites of the Gogurians? Since King Sojurim has decided to make a move on the officials of the royal court, he must have mobilized the top-notch experts of the Gogurians, perhaps even the generals of the Gogurian Empire. If we don't have enough people, not only will we be ineffective, we might even be defeated by them. Steel Arm said grimly. He had lost an arm, and the painful lesson from more than a decade ago still left a deep impression on him. Gongzi, you must pay attention to this matter. The Gogurians in the base that we have encircled are only ordinary soldiers. On the other hand, the subordinates that King Sojurim is sending to assassinate the officials are likely to be elites of the Gogurian Empire. We have to be extremely vigilant in order to encircle them. Otherwise, if the mission fails, none of us will be able to bear the consequences. The matter regarding the Gogurians had caused a huge uproar in the capital, and it had attracted the attention of everyone. Even the foreigners of the western regions were paying close attention to this matter. If the mission were to fail, even the Wang clan would be unable to bear the consequences. Leave such a small matter to me. After a moment of contemplation, Wang Chong smiled. I will coordinate with the royal court through the King of Song and have them deploy their best experts. As long as I tell them that the incident from more than a decade ago will repeat itself, they will understand the severity of the matter. The royal court will know what they should do. The incident from more than a decade ago had left a huge impact on the royal court. Even now, many of the officials still had a deep impression of it. For such a matter, Wang Chong didn't need to beg too much. All he needed to do was to describe the matter. Wang Chong believed that there would be many officials who would take the initiative to request for more experts to be deployed, so there was no need for him to worry about this. Ma Yinlong, the eagle, steel arms, and solitary wolf glanced at one another, and they nodded in agreement. This was the effect of one's influence and background. What Wang Chong could accomplish with a single word was something that they couldn't do even if they were beaten to death. At the very least, if they had a relationship with Wang Chong back then, they wouldn't have suffered such a terrible defeat. Their brothers had contributed to the brilliance of King Sojurim, and they wouldn't have been plagued by nightmares ever since. On the one hand, the four of them were filled with regret, but on the other hand, they were glad that they had the help of a king of nobility, generals, and ministers. Furthermore, the four of them had been expelled from the Bureau of Punishments and the Rear Division, so they could only rely on Wang Chong for this matter. Then there's the sentries. They're the crux to the success of the operation, so we have to find a way to deal with them. Steel Arms said. Hee, don't worry, they won't be able to escape. Wang Chong chuckled. Stretching out a finger, he drew on the ground. This sudden action immediately caught everyone's attention. I've just thought about it. This is the map of the area, so there's no need for us to seal off the entire area. As long as we send a troop here and here, they won't be able to escape. They won't be able to escape. Wang Chong quickly drew out the map. In his previous life, he was extremely familiar with the mountains and rivers of the Central Plains. It didn't take long for him to finish drawing it. Even Ma Yinlong and Solitary Wolf weren't familiar with it. For a young man like Wang Chong to be able to draw it out so easily, they were astonished. But how should we do it? It's impossible for such a large-scale mobilization of troops to not attract the attention of the Goguryans. As soon as the army leaves the city gates, King Sojurim will probably be alerted. Ma Yinlong said. Wang Chong's idea was great, but it wasn't practical at all. Who said anything about mobilizing the imperial army from the city? Wang Chong chuckled, a confident look on his face. The Bureau of Military Personnel conducts regular military movements every year, so all we have to do is to send a troop north. When the time comes, we just have to send an elite troop to infiltrate the troops. Bureau of Military Personnel? The four glanced at one another, and they could see the shock in one another's eyes. To mobilize troops through the Bureau of Military Personnel to encircle the Goguryans, this was an unimaginable feat to the four of them. The military was a matter of national importance, and it couldn't be ignored. Every single order from the Bureau of Military Personnel wasn't to be trifled with. To them, what Wang Chong said was something they didn't even dare to imagine. But in Wang Chong's mouth, it seemed like it was nothing at all. It's not that I'm spouting nonsense. Have you ever thought of the consequences if an influential official of the royal court were to be assassinated? In comparison, the mobilization of troops means nothing at all. Orders are dead, but men are alive. If it turns out to be a good thing, the outcome is something that everyone can accept. Besides, this isn't a large-scale mobilization of troops. All we need to do is to fortify the cities closest to the capital. This way, we can minimize the impact. Wang Chong knew what the four of them were thinking, so he explained. The four of them nodded silently. If it was just a mobilization of troops of this scale, they could still accept it. Now, all that's left is King Sojurim. In an instant, the atmosphere turned heavy once more. This time, even Wang Chong fell silent. It wasn't that he didn't want to help, but that he wasn't able to. He had never met King Sojurim before, so he had no idea what the other party looked like. Under such circumstances, even if King Sojurim were to stand before him, Wang Chong probably wouldn't be able to recognize him. The enemy was in the dark while he was out in the open. Not only so, from the few times they had come into contact with King Sojuram from afar, Fox King Chong knew that the other party was a cunning fellow, and he had a deep understanding of the other party's savagery. The monastery before him was the best proof of that. The eagle, I'll be troubling you then. Once the operation begins, release all of your eagles. I want you to keep an eye on every single Goguryun who leaves the battlefield. Not a single one of them is allowed to escape. It has been more than a decade, and you should know that this is our final chance. The eagle, steel arms, and solitary wolf nodded their heads. Their eyes were filled with the ominous glint that made Wang Chong feel uneasy once more. Wang Chong wanted to say something, but in the end he decided against it. Chapter 256. Regardless of whether it was the Goguryans or Wang Chong's side, both sides had to make their preparations. Even Wang Chong didn't know that the Goguryans had already moved ahead of time. On the other hand, the Goguryans also didn't know that Wang Chong and the others had already discovered their base. However, this wasn't the crux of the matter. Neither side had realized that this had already turned into a race against time. If the Goguryans were to launch their attack a day ahead of time, even if Wang Chong and the others managed to discover their base, they would still be defeated. That monastery was simply too close to the capital. Similarly, if Wang Chong and the others were able to coordinate with the Bureau of Military Personnel before the Goguryans made their move, the Goguryans would surely suffer a crushing defeat. But at this point in time, it was impossible for anyone to conduct reconnaissance or capture the other party's men. That would be too dangerous, and it would easily raise the other party's suspicions. 3 days passed in a flash. It's finally done. In a massive monastery located in the forest outside the capital, a Goguryun dressed in a monk's robe and shaved his head let out a long sigh of excitement. After a long time, they had finally completed their preparations. All of the elite experts dispatched from the distant Goguryeo Empire to participate in the operation tonight to assassinate the important officials of the Great Tang had all arrived at the monastery. A storm of blood was about to descend upon the Great Tang Empire. Most of the residences of those who could become famous officials of the Tang Empire were heavily guarded and had many experts. It was not easy to assassinate them. This was also the reason why they had to travel such a long distance and mobilize experts from within the empire. To use the resources of an empire to assassinate the officials of another empire, this might be considered an assassination, but to the Goguryans, it was a war. Everyone was prepared for a war. Thus, no matter how much preparation they had, it was inevitable that they would die. Are you all ready? The Goguryun dressed in a monk's robe raised his arm and bellowed. In an instant, a thunderous roar echoed in the surroundings. We're ready. For the Empire. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the monk was surrounded by Goguryun elites dressed in black with 3 sabers sheathed on their backs. Only a pair of sharp eyes could be seen, and they were gleaming with fervor, excitement, and fervor. On their bodies, waves of killing intent gathered together, like a landslide or tsunami. After a long period of preparation, which lasted 4 months and traveled across mountains, all the preparations were finally completed. There were more than a few hundred imperial warriors gathered here. The huge temple was densely packed with over 1,000 imperial warriors. Moreover, unlike those imperial soldiers who had been wiped out in the capital, these people were true experts, true elites, handpicked from tens of thousands. 15 years ago, they had set off a storm of blood in the capital of the Tang dynasty with such a large number of elites, shaking the entire Tang dynasty, and most of them had escaped unscathed. Now, everything was about to repeat itself. For Her Majesty, for His Highness, for the glory of Goguryeo. Amidst a frenzied battle cry, the 1,000 black-clothed and masked Goguryun elites unsheathed the Goguryun sabers on their backs, and a dense forest of sabers pointed toward the sky. Under the starlight, they gleamed coldly. Boom! In the next moment, the Goguryun elites leaped over the high walls of the temple, charging toward the Tang dynasty's capital. Go, my valiant warriors! Let the blood of the Tang dynasty flow like a river. The wind howled. On the roof of the Buddhist temple, 3 figures with majestic auras stood there like a mountain range. Gazing at the Goguryans charging toward the temple, their eyes gleamed so brightly that even the stars in the sky paled in comparison. Everything had been prepared. A batch of experts had already infiltrated the city, and the tunnel leading in and out of the city had been specially arranged. Even if an accident were to occur and the city guards were to discover it, they would be able to swiftly eliminate the culprit, ensuring that no news would leak out. After this night, the entire Tang dynasty would be shaken, and the distant Goguryeo Empire would be deeply proud of them. Yi. Just as the group was gazing into the distance and daydreaming, a sudden change occurred. In the darkness of the night, a resplendent firework suddenly burst into the sky. The dazzling light and the long tail of smoke that accompanied it could be seen even from far away. It was extremely eye-catching. What's going on? On the roof of the Buddhist temple, the 3 figures with powerful auras that resembled a storm were stunned and dumbfounded. They weren't the only ones. Even the Goguryan assassins who had leaped over the walls of the temple were dumbfounded. They looked at the sky and subconsciously halted their footsteps. They were in the wilderness, a distance away from the capital. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be such a firework here. Furthermore, this wasn't some festival, so there shouldn't be any fireworks here. In an instant, the entire world fell silent. Even the cheers had vanished, leaving only the howling of the mountain wind. Everyone faintly felt a trace of unease in their hearts. However, it was quiet all around. Other than the firework that shot into the sky, nothing else happened. It felt like an instant, but at the same time, it felt like countless centuries had passed. Just as everyone was thinking that something had happened, in the next moment, Hong Long. The mountains shook as if there was an invisible hand shaking the mountains underground. Countless birds flapped their wings and flew into the sky. Deafening battle cries reverberated throughout the mountains. Before the shocked gazes of the Goguryans, the Tang Dynasty Imperial Army soldiers charged out from all directions. How is this possible? On the roof of the temple, the faces of the 3 powerful Goguryan assassins warped in horror, and they nearly fell from the roof. This is impossible. How can there be so many of them? How did they manage to sneak their way here? Where are the scouts? Where are the scouts? Where are all the scouts we have? The Tang people have already sneaked their way here, so why didn't they send any warning back? Be careful. Enemy attack. Shrill, anxious, and furious Goguryan words echoed in the air, and the Goguryan army outside the temple fell into chaos. They had thought that they would be facing the guards of the officials' residences, not the regular imperial army of the Tang dynasty. This was no longer an assassination, but a war. Be careful. For the empire. Clang, clang, clang. Some of the Goguryan elites were the first to react. They drew all of their weapons and assumed a defensive and offensive stance. But the ones who reacted even faster than them were the Tang dynasty. Boom, boom, boom. Before the Goguryan elites could even react, their chests were pierced by thick metal arrows, and they were pinned to the ground. Master archers. Be careful. There's a master archer. A shrill scream echoed in the air. But as soon as it sounded, it died down. The Goguryan's forehead was pierced by an arrow, and his body was pinned to the ground. Defend! Defend! Those who were deployed here were all elites. After the initial ambush, they immediately scattered and searched for cover before swiftly retreating to the back. Their bodies changed indeterminately, flickering and twisting between the branches. Their movement techniques were so fast and nimble that ordinary people couldn't compare to them at all. Before they could retreat to the Buddhist temple, warhorses neighed as the first wave of imperial cavalrymen, who had carried out the first mission of delaying their opponents, arrived. These warhorses were wrapped in iron armor, and each of them was incredibly tall. Their sturdy bodies contained monstrous strength, and even the trees in their way were smashed to pieces. Their momentum was unstoppable, and they swept away everything in their way. Long. In just an instant, the 2 forces clashed with one another. 2 different war halos lit up simultaneously before clashing heavily with one another. The immense force from the collision shattered the surrounding trees into pieces. thousands of wooden shards flew several dozen zhang into the air. Congratulations to user for killing 691 Gogurians. Congratulations to user for killing 692 Gogurians. Congratulations to user for killing 693 Gogurians. In an instant, a furious gale blew. On a distant hill, Wang Chong was standing beneath a huge tree. That familiar voice sounded in his ears once more, and a huge wave of information gushed into his mind. The bane of the battlefield halo in Wang Chong's body grew stronger once more. A war-related halo. Indeed, it's best to grow in battle. Amidst the furious gale, Wang Chong felt his strength growing at a rapid pace. Every single cell in his body was relaxed, and he felt incredibly comfortable. This method of growing his strength without using anything at all was simply too exhilarating. It's a pity that I'm only one of the commanders in this battle. The true commander is that person over there. Wang Chong turned his head to look in another direction. It was an imperial army general riding on a huge steed with a cold expression on his face. His eyes were staring straight ahead, and he exuded an intense aura of steel and blood. Clearly, he had participated in large-scale battles before. This was a direct assignment from the royal court. Even though Wang Chong had the favor of the King of Song, he wasn't a member of the imperial army. Furthermore, in order to prevent the Gogurians from escaping, the imperial army had mobilized too many imperial army soldiers. Thus, there was a need for a high-ranking imperial army general to command the troops. He was the true commander of the battle. Thus, the benefits that Wang Chong received were unavoidably diluted. However, it was fortunate that Wang Chong had the King of Song's token, and this base was discovered by Wang Chong. Thus, Wang Chong was still able to reap the greatest benefits from it. It's fortunate that I called Uncle in. Good things should not flow to outsiders. After this encirclement and suppression, Uncle will definitely be promoted again. With this contribution, his seniority will far surpass the others, and it's only a matter of time before he rises in the ranks of the imperial army. Wang Chong turned his head to look at Uncle Li Lin, who was leading the army toward the monastery, and a smile crept onto his lips. Chapter 257. Brothers, charge. Don't get tangled up. Remember, our target is King Sojurim. No matter what, we mustn't let him escape. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, a loud bellow suddenly sounded by his ears. Following which, the clopping of hooves sounded. Before Wang Chong could stop them, he saw Ma Yin Long, Solitary Wolf, Steel Arms, and Old Eagle galloping toward the monastery with reddened eyes. A cloud of dust billowed behind them as they charged toward the monastery. Fast. In their eagerness to kill the enemy, Wang Chong wanted to delay their arrival a little, but it was already too late. After pondering for a moment, he decided to just let them be. It would be a wonder if the four of them could hold themselves back for so many years. In the distance, the battle was already nearing the vicinity of the monastery. Boom! Suddenly, the ground trembled. Before Wang Chong could react, he felt a powerful surge of energy gushing out from the direction of the monastery. Wherever the invisible surge of energy passed by, bizarre changes would occur. Under Wang Chong's vision, the feet of the Gogurian assassins suddenly lit up, and a bizarre halo of thorns burst forth. Then a second and a third. The monastery shook 3 times, and 3 different halos of different colors lit up beneath the feet of the Gogurian assassins. Generals. There's a Gogurian general in the monastery. Everyone on the hill was stunned when they saw the halos that lit up in the darkness. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but blink his eyes in astonishment. Generals who had cultivated their war halo to a certain level would be able to imbue their own war halo to their subordinates. This was one of the unique traits of war halo. This was also the origin of the name of war halo. However, this ability wasn't something that everyone could imbue. Only formidable generals who had reached a certain level of cultivation were able to do so. Regardless of which empire it was, be it Goguryeo, the Tang dynasty, Uzun, or Abbasid Caliphate, these generals were extremely influential figures. They wouldn't be as insignificant as ordinary soldiers who could be sacrificed casually. If a general of such caliber were to die here, it would be a huge loss to Goguryeo. The Goguryans have really gone all out. Wang Chong sneered and quickly realized what was going on. Without a doubt, this should be the masterpiece of the leaders of the monastery that Eagle had observed. The fact that the Goguryans had even sent out their most orthodox generals showed just how determined they were to succeed in this operation. Indeed, compared to the open battle on the battlefield, this kind of covert battle had a smaller investment, but the rewards were much greater. Boom! While the three Goguryan commanders on the rooftop of the monastery released their war halos to envelop all of the Goguryans, on the other side, not too far away from Wang Chong, the Imperial Army general who was in charge of this operation stepped forward on his steed and released his war halo as well. Rings of dazzling light immediately burst forth, enveloping all of the Imperial Army soldiers. In the distance, a furious gale blew, and battle cries echoed in the air. Halos collided with halos, and stellar energy collided with stellar energy. The two powerful forces clashed with one another, and the battle swiftly grew more intense. On the surface, the Tang dynasty held the absolute advantage, but the resistance of the Goguryans was extremely intense. The expected scene of the Goguryans collapsing didn't happen. The complicated terrain of the mountains and the dense forest were all things that they borrowed from. On top of that, these Goguryans were all elites with swift and agile movement techniques. On top of that, their ferocious and ruthless three-saber stream actually managed to form a defensive formation, and they didn't collapse. Are you still intending to put up a resistance? Wang Chong sneered coldly. The stubbornness of the Goguryans was truly ingrained in their bones. No matter how bad the situation was, they would still go berserk, determined to bite down on the other party. It was the same for a one-on-one fight, and it was the same for a group attack. However, if the Goguryans thought that they would be able to deal with so many enemies with just 1,000 top-notch elites and the complicated terrain, they were truly naive. Wang Chong abruptly stomped on the ground. Hong long long, the world shook. In an instant, Wang Chong released the bane of the battlefield halo, and an invisible ripple spread across the entire mountain range with Wang Chong at the center. But this time, the target of the ripple wasn't the Imperial Army but the opposing Goguryans. Wherever the ripple passed, the halos beneath the feet of the Goguryans would vanish. This abrupt change shook the entire army. The orderly Goguryan army immediately fell into chaos. Without the support of the halos, the Goguryans suffered heavy casualties in an instant. Not too far away, sensing the changes on the battlefield, the cold Imperial Army general turned his head to look at Wang Chong from afar, and a peculiar glint flashed across his eyes. However, Wang Chong didn't have the luxury of time to explain himself. He heard that familiar voice once more. Congratulations to user for killing 721 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 722 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 723 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 834 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 835 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. Congratulations to user for killing 836 soldiers of the Goguryan Empire. A huge surge of information flowed into Wang Chong's mind, and the bane of the battlefield halo in his body grew significantly. Aren't they being too naive if they think that they can fight against the Imperial Army in the territory of the Tang dynasty? Wang Chong chuckled. With him around, the Goguryans were truly naive to think that they could put up a resistance with their elites. He wouldn't give them the chance to do so. Mayasame Ayaka, tell them to prepare themselves. We'll be setting off at any moment to join the battlefield. Wang Chong said. Yes, Gongzi. Mayasame Ayaka nodded and quickly left. In this battle, Wang Chong didn't have much authority. The main commanding authority still lay in the hands of the general of the Imperial Army. Even so, Wang Chong still used the token from the King of Song to request for a contingent of Imperial Army soldiers to be under his command. Even though Wang Chong didn't have an official rank, no one here could surpass him in terms of strategy and seizing opportunities. Seeking peace through war and replacing retreat with offense, these Goguryans sure are smart. They know that fleeing at this moment will only lead to their deaths. By then, none of them will be able to escape. Thus, they should gather their men to form a defense before finding a way to break out of the encirclement. It's a good idea, but a pity that it's not practical. Wang Chong sneered coldly. This batch of Goguryans was indeed formidable. Given their strength, it was possible for them to gather their men to fend off the attack before organizing their men to break out of the encirclement. However, with him around, they were thinking too much. He wouldn't give them the chance to do so. Trying to scheme before him was no different from playing around. Gongzi, I've gathered everyone. Soon, a voice sounded behind him. Mayase Mayaka was kneeling on the ground with her head lowered, not moving in the slightest. Behind him, a group of about 100 Imperial Army cavalrymen rode their horses and slowly appeared on the hill. These people were well-built, had determined gazes and powerful auras. Every single one of them exuded the aura of 100. They were all elites of the Imperial Army, specially selected by Wang Chong from the Imperial Army. Get ready! Arrow formation. Wang Chong led a horse over, leaped onto it, and drew his sword. His gaze was sharp, and his wrist was straight. Upon seeing Wang Chong's silhouette, a grim expression appeared on the faces of the Imperial Army cavalrymen. When they first followed Wang Chong, they were worried that Wang Chong would blindly command them. But judging from Wang Chong's disposition when he gave the order, they realized that they were overthinking it. At this moment, the feeling that Wang Chong exuded was that of a veteran general. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Wang Chong gazed into the distance, not moving in the slightest. After an unknown period of time, just when everyone thought that Wang Chong's respect would never come down, the long-awaited order finally appeared. Kill. Like ferocious tigers charging down the mountain, the 100 Imperial Army cavalrymen surrounded Wang Chong, Mayase Mayaka, and Mayase Mayaka. As though arrows released from a bow, they charged down the hill furiously. Long. The ground rumbled, and the silhouettes on both sides retreated as swiftly as bolts of lightning. The wind howled shrilly in Wang Chong's ears. As Wang Chong listened to the deafening roar, the thundering of hooves and the neighing of warhorses, the blazing flames in the distance and the cold glint of weapons, a voice seemed to roar in his mind, and he felt like all the blood in his body was boiling. In an instant, his consciousness seemed to have transcended time and space. Once again, Wang Chong felt a calling from the depths of his soul, a calling from the battlefield. He belonged to this place, to the battlefield. As though a miracle, a gap suddenly appeared in the formation of the Goguryans. Tonglong. In the next instant, the 100-plus cavalrymen led by Wang Chong stabbed into the gap like a sharp knife, ripping it apart. The immense might of the rear charge even flung the Goguryan assassins high up into the air. A deafening roar reverberated across the sky. In just an instant, the Goguryan formation had been torn into two, and the formation that they had just stabilized with great difficulty immediately fell into chaos. Bastard! At the top of the monastery, the faces of the Goguryan leaders who were observing the situation from a high vantage point immediately warped. Wang Chong's charge had completely destroyed their previous efforts. The trio's faces were cold. They wanted to destroy this army, but soon, they couldn't be bothered about anything else. Because the Tang people's army was already charging over ferociously. This time, the trio joined the fray. Get ready! There's still one more time. In the distance, Wang Chong, who had just pierced through the Goguryan formation, led his elite cavalrymen and stopped on the opposite hill. From Wang Chong's perspective, the Goguryans were still gathering their formation, and they were preparing to regroup once more. But to Wang Chong, as long as he pierced through their formation twice, all of the Goguryans would be routed. Assassination was one thing, but war was another. The Goguryans had already fallen into his rhythm. Prepare for the second attack. Tonglong. When Wang Chong led the 100-plus elites to pierce through the Goguryan formation for the second time, the 1,000-plus Goguryan elites finally crumbled. They were no longer able to form a proper formation to defend themselves. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, martial world, and tales of demons and gods.